Good morning, friends. Welcome to Sutta Study with Bhante Suddhaso. We will be studying this morning the Vitakkasaṇṭhāna Sutta, the Stabilization of Thought, Majjhima Nikaya 20. And there is a link in the live chat. Welcome to Ela, who says, I hope you will kindly keep on teaching online as well and help us understand the Dhamma. There's still much to be done. Yes, Ela, we're planning on keeping all the Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday live streams and for the foreseeable future. But yes, after the pandemic, we've decided to keep doing live streams. Not every day, that was a little intense, but a little bit less as we're all opening up. I'm happy to hear it's been beneficial for you. And welcome to Michael, Melinda, Sarah, Jens, Yanni, Edward, good to see you. And welcome to Liz, who is tuning in from her 93-year-old mother's bedside. Ooh, she fell and fractured her hip and two ribs. Surgery went well. May she get back to health. Sending her many blessings. Yeah. And welcome to Galaxy as well. All right, so I'll pass it on to Bhante so we can start with Sutta study.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasāmi. So this morning we'll be looking at the Vitakkasaṇṭhāna Sutta. It's Majjhima Nikaya number 20, translated here as the Stabilization of Thought. So this is one of the first suttas that I translated because it's always been one of my favorite suttas. And I know I say that like every morning, but I actually mean it. So the sutta, it's very practical. Because, and I refer to this all the time when people ask about how to deal with restless thinking during meditation. Because this sutta, the Buddha gives 5 very practical ways of dealing with restless thinking during meditation. So this is a really wonderful sutta to be familiar with. It's not very long, and it gives some very direct, straightforward advice on how to get control of your thinking. So as usual, I'll read through the sutta and periodically give some explanations, and then we'll have questions at the end. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi at Jeta's Grove in Anapanasati's park. There the Blessed One addressed the monks. Monks, auspicious sir, those monks replied to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said this. Monks, there are 5 objects of awareness to be given attention to from time to time by a monk who is committed to developing a heightened mind. So heightened mind in the suttas often appears to refer to samadhi, but it's unclear if it only means samadhi or if it also includes the development of insight. But it's usually used in a way that seems to be a stand-in for samadhi. So the Buddha goes on, he says, what 5? Hear, monks, when harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion arise in a monk due to a particular object of awareness, from paying attention to a particular object of awareness, then, monks, that monk is to shift his attention from that object of awareness to another object of awareness that is connected with something wholesome. When he shifts his attention from that object of awareness to another object of awareness that is connected with something wholesome, those harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion are abandoned and they disappear. From their abandoning, the mind becomes internally stable, settled, unified, and concentrated. Monks, just like a skilled carpenter or carpenter's apprentice, strikes away, knocks out, and does away with a coarse peg using a refined peg. In the same way, monks, when harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion arise in a monk due to a particular object of awareness, from paying attention to a particular object of awareness, then that monk is to shift his attention from that object of awareness to another object of awareness that is connected with something wholesome. When he shifts his attention from that object of awareness to another object of awareness that is connected with something wholesome, those harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion are abandoned, and they disappear. From their abandoning, the mind becomes internally stable, settled, unified, and concentrated. So this is the first of the 5 techniques that the Buddha recommends. So if you're focusing on something with your mind and you're noticing that harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, or delusion are arising, then shift your attention to something which is related to wholesomeness. So a simple example of this is if while you're sitting in meditation, you're thinking about someone that you hate, and there's a lot of hatred arising in your mind, then shift your attention to someone that you love, someone that you care about. And then you might notice metta arising. So for example, when metta meditation is taught, usually it's recommended that you start either with yourself or with someone who you care about very strongly. Hopefully those are also the same thing, but not always the case. So it's not recommended that you try to start metta meditation with somebody that you hate or somebody that you're having problems with. It's not very successful. So you start with somebody that you care about, because then it's very easy. The mind naturally inclines towards metta. So in this case, again, you direct your mind towards something connected with what's wholesome. Another example would be if you're dwelling on someone who you find sexually appealing, that's bringing up a lot of desire in the mind, well then turn your attention to the Buddha, something wholesome. And then those thoughts will fade away and be replaced with Buddhanasati, the recollection of the Buddha, awareness of the good qualities of the Buddha. So this is an example of shifting the attention from something which is provoking unwholesome thoughts towards something which provokes wholesome thoughts. In samadhi practice, normally we're actually using a neutral object, such as the body or the breath, or perhaps a kasina if you're into that sort of thing. So we're using a neutral object, something which is not inherently good or bad, but because it is associated with samadhi, that means it's connected with the wholesome. So that would also fit here. Turning your attention towards your samadhi object would fit as turning your attention to something connected with the wholesome. And the simile the Buddha gives, so this is the example of there's a piece of wood which has a hole in it, and the hole has been filled with a coarse peg. So a peg, like a piece of wood that is rough and uneven and doesn't actually fit the hole very well, or it's made out of very low quality wood, maybe wood that doesn't match the rest of the wood. So the carpenter makes a new peg that perfectly fits the hole. It's made out of just the right material, and they place the new peg against the old peg and hit it with a hammer. And the new peg will knock out the old peg and replace it. So the comparison here is our mind is filled with an unwholesome thought. By focusing on something that's provoking unwholesomeness, our mind is filled with an unwholesome thought. So we just knock that out using something wholesome, something which brings up a wholesome state of mind, a wholesome attitude of mind. The second scenario that the Buddha mentions, he says, monks. When that monk shifts his attention from that object of awareness to another object of awareness that is connected with something wholesome, in other words, if you try the first method, if harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion still arise, in other words, if while doing the first method it doesn't work, you still have unwholesome thoughts arising, the Buddha says, then that monk is to consider the disadvantages of those thoughts, thinking, these thoughts are unwholesome, these thoughts are blameworthy, these thoughts result in dukkha, dissatisfaction or suffering. When he considers the disadvantages of those thoughts, those harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion are abandoned and they disappear. From their abandoning, the mind becomes internally stable, settled, unified, and concentrated. Monks, just like a young woman or young man who is naturally fond of adornments, would be upset, humiliated, and disgusted if a snake corpse, dog corpse, or human corpse was tied to their neck. In the same way, monks, when that monk shifts his attention from that object of awareness to another object of awareness that is connected with something wholesome, etc. So this technique the Buddha is giving is reflecting on the drawbacks of unwholesome thoughts. So noticing that when we're engaging in thinking and direction of attention that's provoking defilements, that's provoking greed, hatred, and delusion, we notice this is harmful. This is unwholesome. This is something that the Buddha would criticize. This is something that wise people consider blameworthy. This is something that leads away from enlightenment and gets me caught deeper and deeper in suffering. It's not something that we want to be doing. A simile that the Buddha gives in another sutta, as he says, it's like somebody brings you a beverage, and it looks nice and it smells nice, but it's mixed with poison. Then you would reflect, this might look nice, but it's poisonous. And if I drink it, it's going to cause me harm and suffering. It might even kill me. So we have that same reflection. It's like, yeah, these unwholesome thoughts are kind of appealing. There is something kind of pleasant here, but it's harmful, it's dangerous. It might even destroy my spiritual practice. So we want to be very careful to stay away from things that are harmful to our spiritual practice, things that provoke and build up our defilements rather than diminish them, things that diminish our spiritual faculties rather than strengthening them. So reminding ourselves, these thoughts that I'm engaging in are harmful, they're unwholesome, they're blamed by the wise, they lead away from enlightenment, they result in more dukkha. By doing so, then we may naturally drop those thoughts. We may naturally relinquish them. And the simile he gives, again, is like a beautiful young person who loves to get all dolled up. And somebody comes and hangs a dead dog around their neck. And they're like, oh, horrible. And what do they want to do? Of course, they want to drop it and take it away, naturally. So that's how we should see it. We see these disgusting thoughts appearing in our mind. We should be like, oh, hideous. It's marring my flawless beauty. I need to remove this disgusting thing. Okay, so that's the second one. So the first one is to replace the unwholesome thoughts with wholesome thoughts. So replacing. The second one is to consider the drawbacks, the disadvantages of those unwholesome thoughts. So considering the drawbacks. The third one, the Buddha says, monks, when that monk is considering the disadvantages of those thoughts, if harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion still arise, then that monk is to ignore those thoughts and pay no attention to them. I like this one. When he ignores those thoughts and pays no attention to them, those harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion are abandoned and they disappear. From their abandoning, the mind becomes internally stable, settled, unified, and concentrated. Just like a person with eyes who wants to stop seeing objects that have come into his field of view might close his eyes or look away. In the same way, etc. So this one is the practice of non-attention, non-engagement. So when we notice harmful, unwholesome thoughts appearing in the mind, well, just ignore them. Don't participate. Don't get involved. By non-involvement, they disappear on their own. Those thoughts will only persist if we fuel them. The thoughts only persist if we play along. And turning our attention towards them can simply fuel it, because then we have a tendency to get involved in those unwholesome thoughts. We have a tendency to go into our habitual reactive patterns of participating, of pushing them along. So instead, we're just like, no, thank you. Nope. And they fade away. Again, the simile here is the Buddha says, it's just like if you're seeing something that you don't want to see, well, close your eyes or look away. Wasn't that easy? But you can actually do the same thing with unwholesome thoughts. Just close your mind, look away. Don't look at it. And it goes away. It's breaking the continuity of that chain of thoughts. So this one is non-attention or ignoring, disregarding. The fourth one the Buddha gives, he says, when that monk is ignoring those thoughts and paying no attention to them, if harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion still arise, then that monk is to pay attention to the stabilizing of the thought producers of those thoughts. So this is a rather unusual phrasing that the Buddha is using here. So in Pali, this term is Vitakkasaṇṭhāna Sutta. Get it?
No.
Okay. So Vitakkana means of the thoughts. Vitakkasaṇṭhāna, so vitakka is thought, and saṅkhāra, normally saṅkhāra has the meaning of conditional object or formation, but here it seems to have the meaning of that which produces the thoughts, that which is forming the thoughts, that which is giving rise to the thoughts. And santana again means stabilizing, stilling. So paying attention to stilling or stabilizing the production of the thoughts, the source of the thoughts. So the Buddha says, when he pays attention to the stabilizing of the thought producers of those thoughts, those harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion are abandoned and they disappear. From their abandoning, the mind becomes internally stable, settled, unified, and concentrated. Just like a person who is walking quickly might think, why do I walk quickly? Perhaps I should walk slowly. So he walks slowly. He might think, why do I walk slowly? Perhaps I should stand still. So he stands still. He might think, why am I standing? Perhaps I should sit down. So he sits down. He might think, why am I sitting? Perhaps I should lay down. So he lays down. In this way, monks, a person replaces coarse postures with refined postures. So the simile the Buddha is giving here helps to clarify what he means when he talks about stilling the producers of thought. So the simile here of someone who's walking quickly, who slows down to walking slowly, slows down to standing still, and then sits down, so they're not even putting forth the effort of standing up, and then they relinquish even the effort of sitting up and lie down. So it's this progression of gradually slowing down, gradually reducing one's involvement and participation. So that's what we're doing here. It's gradually slowing down the thoughts. If we can't stop them immediately, then try to slow them down. Try to reduce their intensity. So one thing that you can do is if you're, for example, if you're sitting here and you're thinking, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. Well, does it sound familiar to anyone? Anybody around meditation like this once in a while? Okay. So then first off, take control of that thinking. So actually repeating in your mind intentionally, I hate him, I hate him. And start slowing it down. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him. And you'll start to notice how peaceful it is in between those thoughts. And eventually you'll get to a point where you can just drop the thought entirely and the mind will be peaceful. Another similar thing you can do is to start to gradually turn around the thought. So you're thinking, I hate him. I hate him. And it's like, I hate him because he's a jerk. I hate him because he's a jerk. That jerk makes people hate him. That jerk is causing himself a lot of suffering by making people hate him. That poor guy is experiencing a lot of suffering because of his defilements. Oh, poor guy, may he overcome his defilements and learn how to be kind so that he'll be happier. Oh, may that guy be happy. May he be happy. May everyone be happy. So in this way, you can gradually turn around a mind of hate to a mind of love, a mind of aversion to a mind of metta. So it's gradually turning around the thought. So if trying to forcefully stop a thought or make it turn around instantly, if that's too difficult, then we either slow it down gradually or we slowly turn it around to what's wholesome. So notice that this is the fourth technique. So these techniques are arranged roughly in the order of preference, the order of effectiveness, the order of what's best. So this one, it's somewhat down the list because slowing things down or gradually turning them around means that we continue to participate for a little while, which is not so good because we're still building up some bad karma while we continue participating. But it's moving in the direction of slowing down and stopping the unwholesome thinking, which is why it's still a useful method that we can use from time to time. This is what you use if none of the first three methods work. And then the final method, which again is only to be used if none of the previous four work, the Buddha says, when that monk is paying attention to the stabilizing of the thought producers of those thoughts, if harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion still arise, then that monk is to clench his teeth, press his tongue against the roof of his mouth, and mentally restrain, subdue, and overpower the mind. When he clenches his teeth, presses his tongue against the roof of his mouth, and mentally restrains, subdues, and overpowers the mind, those harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion are abandoned and they disappear. From their abandoning, the mind becomes internally stable, settled, unified, and concentrated. Monks, just like a strong man, might grab a weaker man's head, neck, or shoulder and restrain, subdue, and overpower him. In the same way, monks, when that monk is paying attention, etc., he repeats the method. So this is the final approach, which is to just exert all your mental willpower to crush those thoughts out of your mind, to just force them out of your mind. So an example of this is repetition. So repeating a word or phrase in your mind in order to push out all other thoughts. So when I use this method, I commonly use the word focus. So just repeating in my mind, focus, 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 focus. And that can have the effect of pushing everything else out of the mind. Some people like to use other words or phrases like peace or tranquility or let go or relax. So whatever works is fine. A common one used in Thailand is Buddha. So repeating the Buddha's name over and over again. That can also be effective. So it's not so important exactly what word or phrase one uses, because you're just using it to push out all the other thoughts from the mind, to crush all the other thoughts from the mind. This can also be done without using an internal repetition, without using any words or phrases. And this is a bit harder to explain, but it feels a little bit like clenching your mind. Kind of like when you clench a muscle, like when you tighten your muscles, you can do the same thing with your mind. You clench your mind. And there's a feeling of forcefulness and tension there, but it has the effect of stopping whatever thought pattern is currently going on, of interrupting the thought pattern. And once it's interrupted, then we can choose not to resume it. But this is, once again, it's the last method that Buddha recommends. It's to be done when everything else is not working. Because this method sometimes generates agitation, sometimes generates restlessness, it can generate tension. So it's not the best option because it can sometimes cause harmful side effects of its own. So once again, these 5 methods are, first off, replacing with a wholesome thought. Second, contemplating the drawbacks of the unwholesome thought. Third, ignoring the unwholesome thoughts, not paying attention, not involving with them, non-involvement. Fourth one, slowing down, so reducing or gradually turning around the unwholesome thought patterns. And fifth is restraining or crushing. So forcefully crushing the unwholesome thought patterns. Those are the 5 methods. And then the Buddha summarizes. He says, when harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion arise in a monk due to a particular object of awareness, from paying attention to a particular object of awareness, then when that monk shifts his attention from that object of awareness to another object of awareness that is connected with something wholesome, those harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion are abandoned and they disappear. From their abandoning, the mind becomes internally stable, settled, unified, and concentrated. When he considers the disadvantages of those thoughts, when he ignores those thoughts and pays no attention to them, when he pays attention to the stabilizing of the thought producers of those thoughts, and finally, when he clenches his teeth, presses his tongue against the roof of his mouth, and mentally restrains, subdues, and overpowers the mind. Those harmful, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, aversion, and delusion are abandoned and they disappear. With their abandoning, the mind becomes internally stable, settled, unified, and concentrated. Monks, this is called a monk who is in control of all his patterns of thought. He will think whatever thought he wishes to think. He will not think whatever thought he does not wish to think. In other words, if we work to develop control over our mind in this way, then we can get to a point where no thought appears in our mind except what we want to appear. So people often say they feel like their mind is out of control. Well, it doesn't need to be that way. We can get it under control. We can train it. In fact, that's what we're doing in Buddhist practice. We're learning how to control our thoughts, learning how to control our own mind. And then the Buddha says, craving has been severed, the fetters have been removed, and through the appropriate understanding of conceit, dissatisfaction has been terminated. In other words, once we have full control over our own mind, then we can attain enlightenment. In fact, he's effectively equating the two. He's equating control of one's thought processes to the attainment of awakening, the attainment of enlightenment. This is what the Blessed One said. Satisfied, those monks delighted in the Blessed One's speech. So that's the end of the sutta. At this time, if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and ask, and I'll do my best to answer.
Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, there are no questions at this time, but they might appear soon. And Galaxy is also happy that we're continuing the live streams. Initially, it came out as love streams, I saw. We like the love stream. So we'll continue love streaming. Oh, and Liz says, thank you for the metta. My mother is the kindest, most compassionate person I have ever known and actively taught me metta. Eternal thanks to BI for exposing me to Dhamma and illumination of the path. Oh, very happy to hear that. And many blessings again to your mom. All right. Oh, we have also a friend, Tullia, from Italy that is watching. Oh, and hello, Venerable Arya Sudhamma. Good to see you online. So Venerable is asking, will you clarify the fourth method, how slowing relates to turning around?
Yeah, so slowing down is the method that the Buddha clearly describes here. And I think that's the most straightforward approach. So I mentioned turning around as it's the example I gave was of slowly turning a thought of aversion into a thought of metta. So that's gradually reducing the aversion content of the thinking. So that's how it relates to slowing down or reducing. Gradually slowing down or reducing the aversion or the momentum of hating from the thought patterns. So in that sense, it's turning around from aversion to metta. But by doing so, it's also slowly reducing the aversion content in the thoughts. That's how it's related.
Great. Thank you, Bhante. There is not anything else at the moment. Hayasudama says, got it. Thanks.
Great. Happy to see you joining in, Venerable. Okay, maybe that's it for the morning now.
Ayanya has a question. Bhante, is the breath considered as wholesome thought when we do Anapanasati?
So the breath is neutral, but if it helps us develop samadhi, then it would be considered connected with the wholesome. So that would fit as something connected with the wholesome, because it's what we're using to build up samadhi. Okay.
And Unknown says, I use metta for anything that agitates the mind. Works very well.
Yeah, metta is very powerful. It's very potent. It can be a very effective way of developing serenity and samadhi, as well as a counter to aversion.
All right, and I think that's all for this morning. This evening, Bhante J will be talking about the trauma in everyday life. Actually, Nora has a question. My question is maybe about free will. I wonder to what extent we have free will, because the brain seems to just excrete thoughts, but this sutta suggests we can in fact control our thoughts.
We can in fact control our thoughts. Yeah, that's true. We can. But until we attain full enlightenment, it's going to seem like the mind is just producing thoughts. And from one perspective, there's a certain amount of truth to that. So I like to think of it as there being two different kinds of thoughts. So there are voluntary thoughts, which are things that we're actively participating in. And there are involuntary thoughts, which are things which appear in the mind as echoes or remnants of past mental activity. But there is a distinctly different feeling to these two kinds of thoughts. So voluntary thoughts feel very loud. They feel very active because we're fueling them, we're feeding them, we're engaged in them. Involuntary thoughts have a certain quietness to them, like they lack power unless we give them power. They just kind of float through the mind and then disappear. And if we don't get wrapped up in them, then they actually don't affect us at all. Just like sounds in the environment, it doesn't affect us unless we get involved in it. So it's important to make a distinction between those. And what we find, the more we look at our mind, is how much of what we think is involuntary is actually voluntary. How much of what we think is just thoughts appearing in the mind is actually thoughts that we're engaging in, that we're feeding or participating in. And we also notice how quickly we start participating in involuntary thoughts. So an involuntary thought appears, and very quickly we start participating. And then it becomes voluntary. And that's when it becomes a problem. Okay.
Great. Nora also says, super interesting sutta. And Galaxy echoes that. I like this sutta. It is very practical and useful for people like me who have too much analytical energy. Don't we all?
Yeah, it's a great sutta. It's a really good list of 5 to come back to when you're having a hard time in your meditation.
Great. Also, Sarah is happy about this sutta. Lots of Dhamma Sukha, I see. That's why tomorrow we're going to talk about Dhamma Sukha, apparently. All right. Okay. Well, thank you again, Bhante, for your teachings. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. This evening, as I was mentioning, Bhante J will be sharing some words of Dhamma on trauma in everyday life. Tomorrow will be, once again, meeting for sutta study and evening talk. And this will be happening until Friday. And then starting next week, we will only be meeting Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And so we're going to do a bit of less is more. So less Dhamma, but more Dhamma Sukha. And Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays, we'll be meeting morning and evening, as we have done so far. And Unknown is asking, Bhante, can you teach Dhamma to the US police? Actually, we have been trying to do that a while back, but it didn't happen. Maybe we can try again. There is a wonderful monk in Canada who does that with the Canadian police. The urban monk. Right now, I can't remember. Do you remember his name, Bhante?
Yeah, Bhante Sarnapala.
Yes, Bhante Saranapala, he's great. He does regular meditation teachings to the Canadian police. All right, so we'll see you hopefully in less than 12 hours and also tomorrow for Sutta study. All right, have a great